So I hope that you found your sermon notes. I want to encourage and invite you to pull those out. Hopefully you'll find some good information there this morning as we continue our journey through Unshackled, trying to discover how to become unshackled from debt so that we might do more for God. One of the things I realized this week is how much I love fruit. How many of you guys love fruit? I mean, I just love fruit, right? And a part of what I love about fruit is it's beautiful, it's delightful, it's delicious, it's wonderful, all that stuff, right? But one of the things I love about fruit is you can tell, at least most fruit, you can tell what it is the instant you see it, right? I mean, the instant you see it, you know, man, that's good stuff, and I want some of that, right? So if, for instance, I would put up on the screen a picture of some fruit, you would know instantly what it was, right? What is that? It's an apple, right? And if we didn't have that, what is that? It's a banana. You know just instantly on sight, right? Strawberry, right? And then after the strawberry, there's an orange. Surely you know the answer to these, right? And then after the orange, there's grapes, right? In the 8 o'clock service, we had some really young kids, probably 4 or 5 years old, and instantly they knew what all these fruits were. And a part of what that says is, early on in life, we learn very quickly what fruit is. And certainly what fruit we like, maybe what fruit we don't like, but instantly we know just by looking at it what it is. We knew that strawberry, we knew that apple, we knew the orange, the instant we saw it. Well, a part of the beauty of that is not just that it's delicious, but that Jesus himself, our Savior, understood the power of those images. He would, on a number of occasions, use fruit as an analogy or a metaphor for how we ought to live as followers of Jesus. You might recall in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus uses the metaphor or the image of a tree. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus says, look, good trees don't bear bad fruit. Likewise, bad trees don't bear good fruit, right? And he goes on to say, look, we all are known by our fruit. Well, that's an interesting thing for a Christian, right? For a follower of Jesus, if we're to be known by our fruit, then we might want to know what that fruit is. Your first blank is that very thing. As Christians, we are known by our fruit. Well, what might that fruit be? It's not apples, oranges, and bananas, right? That fruit is actually what Paul describes in the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5. When Paul describes the fruit of the Spirit, he says, look, it's love and joy, peace and patience, kindness and goodness, faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. And when we live into those fruit, people then know that we're followers of Jesus. When we are joyful, when we are peaceful, when we are loving, when we are kind, when we, yes, every once in a while actually have self-control. When we live into those things and demonstrate those things, then people see in us God's fruit. People witness in us that we must be a follower of Jesus because we live into this fruit. And so hopefully that's what we're doing, right? That every day we try our level best to live into these things, to be patient and to be kind and to be faithful, all of those things. Now, none of us are perfect. None of us do it well all of the time, but it certainly ought to be our goal. Jesus loved this metaphor of the fruit so much, he would share it likewise in the Gospel of John. You might recall in John chapter 15, Jesus uses this analogy yet again. In John chapter 15, in the second verse, Jesus talks about that God removes branches that don't bear fruit. And he goes on to say, and he trims those branches that do bear fruit because they will bear more fruit. How many of you have ever pruned trees before, whether fruit trees or otherwise, right? We know its importance, right? I remember a few years ago I was pruning some of the hedges and trees around the house, and for Kay's site, my wife's site, it was just a little too much. She said, Daniel, I think you've killed it. I think you've killed it. And I said, no, honey, I think it'll work. I think, it'll all come back. And certainly, sure enough, it's due time. It came back. It was much stronger. And I had the blessed opportunity and the very Christian opportunity to say, see? We shouldn't point fingers, right? I mean, that's not the right thing. Shouldn't point fingers. But pruning is important. Pruning helps the plant. Pruning helps it become strong. We as humans don't often like the pruning that God does in our own lives, but every once in a while, God must prune us as well. But the purpose of the pruning is so that the fruit, love and joy, peace and patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, self-control, faithfulness, become stronger, become more full, become more real in the way in which we live. This becomes a very wonderful way to better understand it. And so Jesus, in telling this story, often wants us to better understand how we can live into God's ways. So much so that in the next couple of verses, John chapter 15, verse 4, Jesus continues that description. You may recall he talks about how we need to abide in the vine, abide meaning live or dwell or have our being, and that as we do, that we will become stronger. But if we don't abide in the vine, then we won't have any power, any capacity as the branches. And so part of what Jesus is trying to describe is this wonderful opportunity to live well into fruitful, faithful living, to demonstrate these fruit, to do what it is God is literally asking us to do. So much so that Jesus would go on in this same John chapter 15 to begin to unpack, what does that literally look like? What does this fruit look like? So join with me in chapter 15 at verse 8, where Jesus begins to describe to the disciples and to you and me some specific ways that this fruitfulness takes shape. Listen now for this word beginning in verse 8. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I've made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit. Fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. Thanks be to God for the reading and hearing of a portion of God's most holy and trusted word. So Jesus begins to better shape for us, what does it look like, this fruit? How will I know that it's a strawberry or an orange or an apple? Well, the way in which I know that is that I will be demonstrating, most of all, love. That's what Christ called us to. That's what Christ commanded us to do, right? Is to love other people. And love, of course, makes its way known in lots of different ways and lots of different shapes, but not the least of which is caring for another person, helping that person out, cherishing that person, acknowledging that they are a person of worth and value, have meaning and purpose, that we claim for that other, whoever they are, that they are valuable, that God and we do love them. But most of all, Jesus says, bear much fruit. Do that which you've been called to do. Do the loving, do the joy, do the peace, do the patience, you get it? Do that fruit. It's an action. It's not something that I hold in my head or even in my heart. It's something that I must live into. It's why Jesus wants to share that with us this powerful way. We're known by our fruit. Fruitful, faithful living is demonstrated not by what we know, but by what we do. And it's been my great joy over the last few years to discover all the ways that Trietsch does this ministry, bears the fruit of Christ, lives the faithful life of Christ. There are a myriad of opportunities and examples I might share with you this morning. I'm simply going to highlight one. It's called Honey Dudes. How many of us are familiar with Honey Dudes? It's a great ministry, right? Honey Dudes is a collection of guys started a few years ago, and they began to discover they could help women out, in particular widows, single moms, women of veterans who need help around the house every once in a while because they don't have someone to do it with them or for them. And so the Honey Dudes' complete outreach is to live the faithful, fruitful ministry of service to others. Watch as they tell their story here on the screen.
We started Honey Dudes about 5 years ago. We wanted to be able to take care of mission work here locally as opposed to having to travel.
Yeah, and I know Kevin, when Kevin introduced me to this 5 years ago, it was all about, this was a forgotten group. Again, local, in our own community, wives, mothers, sisters that just didn't have anyone.
We pretty much take care of widows, military wives whose husbands are deployed, and single moms.
The first place I was sent was to a little old lady's house, and she wanted me to change a light bulb that was up high. And then she wanted me to move some stuff off of a top shelf. And then she asked me if I could move some small pieces of furniture. And then she just wanted to chat. So for 2 hours we sat there and talked about her and her ex-husband and where they traveled to.
And that's really the blessing that we've gotten, is the backstory from a lot of these ladies that they're so interesting, and they've done so much in the community that they're kind of at the point where they some of them can't give anymore. They don't have the energy to give anymore. And it's truly amazing, some of the stories we've been able to hear.
And our reward is how grateful they are for the little things that we do.
You come in with one job to change some light bulbs, and the next thing they want is the plumbing fixed, and then the next thing is a shower curtain added, and then again furniture moved, and then the story.
Beyond just the ladies that are in our church, or it's people throughout the community.
It's the scope of the volunteers now,
Right.
and how that's continued to grow and amass older, younger, middle-aged individuals. Everybody wants to jump in and try to help now. No matter what the task was, it was just that thankfulness, that the amount of how grateful they were for it. You would think you'd build them a new house, and you literally change a few light bulbs.
We've seeded 4 or 5 churches, and the update on that is there's a couple of those churches that have seeded other churches. We gave them the formula, we gave them seed money to cover any expenses at the beginning to get it rolling, and apparently it's rolling well enough they're seeding other churches.
It's becoming something that's a little more viral,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just a group of men here in this community. They're doing great things, which we are, but it's also creating that want, that need in other communities as well.
We've got neighbors that say, hey, take my son with you when you go on the next honeydew project. Couple things that helps. Keeps them off the street. It teaches them how to do a repair that they're going to be able to take into their relationship. And it shows them, hey, I got to see Dad, not just Bible study. I got to see Dad Bible doing.
But I mean, that's the core basis of what Trietsch is all about. I mean, we drive for mission.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody can give a little money and do a little something, but to physically get out and actually touch people with it on a weekly or monthly basis, I mean, that's what drives me at the church.
The kids look at their parents differently, their father differently. And I mean, it's like cheating I'm seeing heaven on earth. I don't have to go all the way to Tennessee or Africa or Somalia or, Czechoslovakia. I feel like there's enough here.
Yeah.
I've had one ceiling fan turned into 4 ceiling fans.
It happens a lot, doesn't it?
Those ceiling
Shower
fans,
heads.
we're getting pretty good at ceiling fans.
Really good ceiling fans.
I don't know what captivated you, but a couple of things that I was real enamored by that Kevin in particular said. My kid doesn't just get to see me Bible studying, my kid gets to see me Bible doing. A part of faithful living, a part of fruitful living is doing that which God calls us to. This whole commitment of faithfulness and kindness and generosity and gentleness is the way faithful, fruitful living lives itself out. But then I loved it, he used the metaphor as well when he talked about seeding other groups, right? So our honeydews started here and began to reach out into the community and live faithfully and fruitfully, and then they began to seed other groups who now have actually seeded other groups. And one of the things we know about fruit, among other things, what distinguishes fruit is its seed. And its seed helps promote proliferation of more fruit. And so a part of the gift of honeydews is not just that they've taken care of some women in this church or even just this community, but they begun to branch out and to abide in the vine and live faithfully and fruitfully into God's love. The honeydews are in part why we want to do the Unshackled campaign. They represent faithfulness. As your notes indicate, faithfulness is found by a desire and a willingness to become givers, not takers. To become givers of love, givers of joy, givers of faithfulness, givers of patience, givers of all of those fruit of the Spirit. That we are not just takers in life, but we want to give something away. Ultimately, that's what fruitful stewardship is. Faithful stewardship, rather, is using our time and our talents, our energies and our dollars, using that faithfully as stewardship, and it's called fruitful living. That's the way it's expressed. It's expressed by living what it is we claim we believe. And that becomes important because the faith of Jesus is not just an intellectual endeavor. The faith of Christ is doing that which we claim we believe. That's abiding in the vine. That's living fruitfully and faithfully. It's why the Unshackled campaign is so important, because we want to become unshackled from debt so that we can do more. More clothing, more feeding, more teaching, more loving, more sharing, more giving. I mean, we already do an amazing amount, but what would it look like if we were able to re-engage, for instance, some of the funding that we had to cut off last year to our missionaries because we didn't have enough money? We had to stop funding missionaries in Brazil and Panama and Cameroon simply because the money was not available. With the Unshackled campaign, some of that will become available, and we'll be able to possibly re-engage those missional endeavors that help those missionaries on the ground, in the field, sharing the love of Jesus, teaching the love of Christ, being the hands and feet of Jesus. What would it be like if we were actually able to fund Honeydude's ministry rather than them having to have their annual golf tournament, which is just a couple of weeks away, right? They wouldn't have to fundraise. We'd actually help them do what it is Christ is calling them to do. What would it be like if every single year in the annual budget we had money set aside to build clean, fresh drinking water wells like we raised special money for last spring? Now we're building those water wells in Ethiopia, and people will have clean, fresh drinking water for the very first time. But what would it be like if every single year we were able to build one or maybe even two water wells simply because money had been freed up to do more? What would it be like if we were able to help Kyle's Place, the homeless shelter for teenagers in Louisville and Denton, every single year rather than a special offering on Christmas Eve like you so generously gave to last year? But what if we could do it every year, simply because we've freed up some capital so that God's hands and feet could be real? What would it be like if we were able to connect more with Christian Community Action or Dallas City Square to help alleviate suffering and poverty in the region and in the area? We can through the Unshackled campaign. We can become more faithful, more fruitful, more deliberate in the living out of the faith. Just some numbers so that we have them and have a better understanding. Our Unshackled campaign is going to try to help alleviate some of our debt because we've been burdened by this. Now, we're not overwhelmed by it. We're not going to shut the doors to the church because of it, but we are hindered in our ministry. We are encumbered because of it. Our debt is $7.7 million. Now, that's not a huge number, but it's a large number. And it's a number that can be reduced simply because we need to be able to free up that money to do faithful, fruitful ministry. That 7.7 represents $455,000 in the annual budget every single year. Man, that's 14 or 15% of our annual budget. What might it be like if we could offload some of that so that we might actually do more hands-on ministry? So we've set a goal. The goal for the Unshackled campaign is to raise $3.5 million over the next 3 years, so that in addition to every single month over the next 3 years, paying our regular monthly mortgage every single month out of the general operating budget, we're going to invite all of us to participate in donating $3.5 million over the next 3 years. And if we do that, we will free up more than $200,000 every single year from here on out. And that money can go to alleviating suffering, to bringing cool, clean water, to helping those who need a hand up, to being the hands and feet of Jesus. It will allow us to do so very much. And I get excited by that. I hope you do too. Because a part of the gift of that, a part of the opportunity there is to be the fruit even more. To demonstrate that love and joy, peace and patience, kindness and goodness, faithfulness and generosity and self-control. What might it be like if we could make that possible? So the Unshackled campaign is undergirded by three things here in your notes. Three things help guide the principle of why we want to do that. The first is it's grounded in gratitude. We are so grateful for who God is and what God is doing. That's why those first couple of weeks we celebrated all that God has done, and the children made those gratitude cards, and you made some more, and we've hung them up out there as a weekly reminder that we are so grateful to God and all that God does. And we should never forget that richness. Well, not only is it grounded in gratitude, but it's revealed in prayer. And a part of what we learned last week was that if we have this open, constant dialogue with God, we can discern where God is leading us and how God is leading us. And ultimately, not only is it grounded in gratitude and revealed in prayer, but it's lived in faith. What better way to live the faith of Jesus Christ than to free up some dollars that have been going to principal and now can go to people? That will free up some dollars that have been going to mortgage, but now can go to ministry, so that we can actually impact people's lives, so that we can actually transform more people's lives. That's living faith fruitfully and faithfully for God. Well, friends, I pray that we will indeed be grateful to God, that we will continue this prayer, Lord, what do you want to do through me? And that we will begin more and more every single day discovering how it is that we can live faithfully and fruitfully for Jesus Christ. For when that happens, people will be able to say of us, not because of what we claim, but because of what we do, they must be a follower of Jesus, because I witness in them love and joy, peace and patience, kindness and goodness, generosity and faithfulness and self-control. May it be so, and may we live faithfully because we've become unshackled. Will you pray with me? Holy and loving God, thank you indeed that you call us to this time and place, that you offer us the opportunity to live well into your kingdom, to promote your will and your way, and to live your fruit day in and day out. Thank you, God, for allowing us to abide in you, that we might have the strength and the courage to do your good work and to be your faithful, fruitful followers. God, this is our prayer, and we lift it in the name of the great fruit bearer, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.